Hello, I'm David, and this is Sapiens Forward with news and discussion on AI topics that matter to regular people. Today is July 5th, 2025, and we're going to take a look at some of the topics on AI news that have come across my feed recently. We're going to look at some topics related to education and employment. So, like I said, not going to be covering things like what is the latest AI model, what's new this week, what's the game changer. No, we focus on things that matter to regular folks. Specifically, today we can cover a lot of topics around employment. The job market is a big area that's got a lot of people really on edge. So we're going to hit on some of those topics and also talk a little bit about AI in the restaurant space. So let's get right to it. First one, global AI workforce preparation strategies being analyzed by researchers. So University of Georgia researchers, University of Georgia here in the United States, those researchers there analyzed 50 different countries and their AI workforce strategies, finding only 13 nations prioritize comprehensive training programs. While 65% of elementary students are going to work at jobs that don't even exist today, apparently a lot of countries are lacking detailed plans for preparing workers for an AI-driven economic transformation. So there's a pretty profound assertion there and statement. 65% of elementary students will work in jobs that don't exist today. So there's certainly been a lot of discussion recently, and touched on it here on the channel, about really notable statements by various AI company leaders and CEOs about 50% of white collar professional type of jobs are just going to be disappearing over the next few years. What I don't think is talked about quite as much as it should be, that's different from that type of statement, which is there's going to be jobs that exist 10, 20 years from now that we can't even imagine right now. And not because it's so far fetched, it's just so far out in the idea in the realm of science fiction. It could be, but more rather, we just don't imagine needing to do it right now. And this is one of those areas about disruption from AI and how it impacts jobs and processes in work and the things we do. A lot of people look at it from the standpoint of, okay, so currently I do X job and AI is going to do that job instead of me. Well, sometimes you're not directly replaced by an automation system necessarily, but rather upstream from the work that you do, from the process that forms the core of maybe what you do. That problem that originally caused your job or your role or the task you do to be needed, it gets solved by the AI or the automation. And so downstream from that, the job that was created or to solve that problem is not needed anymore. It's not like AI is doing that job anymore necessarily in that type of example, but rather the problem that created the need for the job in the first place is gone. So now that job is no longer necessary. Now, if we look at it from a different standpoint, there's all kinds of things that AI could solve that create new issues or problems that need to be solved, but AI cannot solve them. So when there's a lot of talk by some of the financial and economic and investing luminaries about, well, yeah, there's going to be disruption from AI, but AI is going to create a lot of jobs. Well, that could be a result of new issues and problems that need to be solved that AI just can't do. Most of those will probably be things that are very human centric, that involve empathy and intuition and very critical reasoning around human concerns that people have. And many of the elementary school students, very young children right now, when they are in like a workforce 10, 15, 20 years from now, like this is saying, it seems very plausibly they're going to be doing things I can't imagine. I think about that a lot because I have children. I think a lot about, what's it going to be like for them going to college? Because certainly higher education is being disrupted quite a bit right now. Will there even be a need for them to go to a university 20 years from now? I don't know what that's going to look like. But it does seem clear to me that, the jobs that are going to be prevalent are going to be very different. So I think this is very on point, very poignant. The other piece of this news story, coming from Newswise, related to University of Georgia's research about various countries and their preparation and how they're prioritizing training and their strategies in general. It does seem like some of the European nations are leading in kind of prioritizing AI education. Some of the recent news stories we talked about more specifically with the UK, United Kingdom. They've got a lot of initiatives going on. Canada, looking at how they're prioritizing training. The United States certainly has made it a priority with recent executive orders by the administration this year, indicating that there should be more investment and strategy and leadership in ensuring that AI is featured in the educational system in the United States. But those executive orders, they don't just instantly make it happen. Of course, that is largely indicating to agencies in the United States government that they should support that and make investments to that. In this case, Department of Education. We'll see how that goes, considering the Department of Education in the US has been massively undercut this year by the administration. But it is interesting to see how different countries are approaching this. I think it's very important that we have some kind of component for driving education on AI for people. One of the key AI principles that I talk about on the channel is that AI literacy is going to be very important. We can't just ignore that it's here. It's, at some point that talking about that type of principle won't even matter because it will be a part of everybody's life. Right now, it seems like it's kind of a choice for many people to whether interact with and use AI tools or not. And that was kind of the way it was with the internet years ago. It doesn't really seem like that's much of a choice nowadays. With the internet, everybody uses it unless you're in a place that doesn't have access to it. It's going to be like that with AI tools. So AI literacy is important. It's going to be part of your job in some fashion, some way, shape, or form. So only 13 of 50 countries that are selected for this research are showing some kind of comprehensive AI workforce training. I mean, to start, I imagine that over the next few years, more countries are going to pick up on that because they're going to ascertain that they're going to be at a severe disadvantage with their workforce and their population if they're not elevating the level of AI literacy. So we'll see how that goes. The research also touches on vulnerable populations like elderly and unemployed workers. Not a lot of countries seem to be addressing that. Certainly, one of the things I think about a lot, certainly from like the cybersecurity aspect, are older populations. I feel that it's safe to say that they're particularly vulnerable to some of these AI tools and how they can be used for committing scams. The AI tools, if not used directly as part of instigating the scam, using like deep fakes and things like that, these AI tools are going to make it so that scams will be conducted on such a more widespread basis and to make them more believable. I mean, I was targeted by a phishing scam just this week. It's crazy. It happens to everybody, right? And so, yeah, there's certainly, I believe there should be more efforts and investment by countries to sort of help educate their most vulnerable populations as they could be impacted by AI. And unemployed people and elderly people are definitely high in that quadrant. So these are important topics, and we're going to keep on touching on this because AI, still relatively speaking, is in its earliest stages. We're feeling disruption now, but I think it's going to be over the next couple years where it starts to kind of really ramp up, and we're going to see, what things are working, what aren't, and things that work are going to be emphasized way more. I mean, companies are trying things out now. Sometimes it's working, sometimes it's not, and they're reversing course. Once they figure out what works and what the AI can do, then they're probably going to go on it very aggressively. All right, set the next topic. So number 2, CEOs use AI warnings as a management strategy for workforce changes. So we talked a little bit the other day about how some of the various CEOs, Andy Jassy at Amazon being one specifically, just really putting it out there to the workforce like, hey, you really ought to expect that AI is going to have some pretty drastic impacts on workforce reduction. So I think that's pretty notable that they put that out there. And there's been a lot of chatter from various CEOs in the news. We've touched on CEOs like at Anthropic, Klarna, and other ones. They're just saying, hey, we're going to see big disruption to employment. We're going to be going all in on AI, that sort of thing. And you have other companies who are just saying, oh, yeah, something 20, 30% of our code is being done by AI now. All these types of statements, they really drive a lot of fear, understandably. Like, every time one of these news stories comes out, these comments by CEOs comes out, there's a corresponding level of anxiety and chatter on channels like X.com, Reddit, where people are just freaking out, right? Understandably, I get it. But this is an interesting article from Axios. It's really kind of suggesting that, these types of PR pieces, public relations, these news stories being put out there, hitting on some of these communications by CEOs is probably a decent chance it's also part of kind of a corporate strategy. Now, these companies, they're probably trying to do several things all at once, right? One, they're trying to stay apprised of and on top of how AI is disrupting things for their own business, and trying to figure out how they can use AI either directly in their products or a part of their own workflows, right? And part of that normal life cycle of any business is trying to balance their workforce to do the work they need to do to generate revenues. And so part of that, sadly to say, is sometimes there's an adjustment to that. Companies lay off workers because they have more workers than they feel they need for one reason or another, that sort of thing. Maybe the company's not doing so well, and so they're adjusting. So companies also have to do workforce adjustments, lay people off, make reductions, right? They're also, looking at how they can use AI as part of their processes themselves, like how they can be more efficient. So another way to make themselves more profitable, of course, is to not use as much energy or effort to generate revenue. So if they can do more work, be more productive, that's kind of the technical term here, to generate the work that creates money for the company, then they can make more profit with less expense. So all these different kinds of things that these companies are having to do all the time, they go about them in different ways. But what we're really hitting on here with this story is that sometimes these companies, they're putting out these messages, they're putting out messaging to their employees. Sometimes it's for them to try and say, hey, look, we need to be using AI more. We need to be more efficient. Maybe a lot of employees aren't wanting to use AI. Maybe they're afraid it's going to replace them. Why would they want to go all in and using something that they feel is going to replace them? So very understandably, I can see why people are resistant to using it. Of course, as I've mentioned just a few minutes ago, and often, we, for workers, we should become literate on how to use these AI tools, and we should learn about how they could impact or work or facilitate our jobs and the work we do, because at some point it may be required to use it. Or at some point we may be overburdened with work and AI will be a way to make it more manageable. So if you look at it from the CEO standpoint, they want their workers to probably be using it. And so they're saying, hey, if you don't use AI, you're just going to be replaced by it. I think, in the near term, the most common scenario is going to be augmentation. We've seen several companies kind of go all in on AI and reverse course. We're finding that AI can't necessarily do everything yet. And since there's so much complexity and uniqueness to every company and what they do in their workflows and processes and products, right? AI can't just always figure out everything. The next best thing is, have the workers that already know those processes and products stay involved and have AI make them more effective at it. Maybe being able to take some of the busy work out of their day so they can focus on that more higher value work. It seems like a good thing to me. I really hope that it stays more in that direction rather than just outright replacement of people. Because ultimately, another AI principle I talk about on the channel is AI should serve people. It should help make our lives more meaningful and allow us to spend more time in valuable pursuits, instead of just replacing us and leaving us all scrambling, trying to figure out how to survive. Like, what would be the point of that? But, go back to the original point of this article from Axios is, there seems to be a lot of fear-based messaging from leadership at companies, and I really hate to see it. There's probably some genuine leadership concern from those companies trying to make sure their companies stay on track and guide their employees. But I have to say, kind of a note of cynicism, I'm sure some of these companies are, using messaging around AI and this fear-based stuff as some kind of ploy to manipulate public opinion and public relations and stock prices and stuff like that. I mean, it's not a new thing. But there you go. Um, I would say my advice would be try not to get too overly anxious about what these CEOs and leaders are saying. Take it with a grain of salt, but don't ignore it either, right? Like there is disruption happening and it's continue to happen. And those of us who remain complacent are probably going to find yourselves in a really bad spot. So pay attention, focus on learning, focus on figuring out how to elevate your skill sets and increasing your AI literacy, figuring out how you can use it in your job. Even if your current company you're at, for maybe they go a route of more than just reduction in headcount, but just straight up replace people. There's going to be other companies that will recognize the value that a person can bring to the work being done, and you'll have the skills and you'll move there. So that's the mindset to take. Let's go to the next article, number 3. So News Corp's implementing AI tools despite journalists' concerns about job security. So News Corp is introducing their own tools. They wouldn't be the first. Talked about Business Insider a little while back, introducing tools. A lot of these media companies, they're being hit from all sides right now with a lot of disruption. It's not just the fact that there's AI tools that are disrupting how the work can be done, but these companies are also being disrupted by Google, right? So Google has its own AI systems that's put out there. It's changing how a search engine works and the whole search landscape on the internet is working. So I think it's safe to say media companies like News Corp, Business Insider, all these others are facing a lot of pressure. They're facing pressure from their channels by which they monetize the work and the products that they produce, the eyeballs, the attention that they get on the internet and other places, traffic being driven to their websites. But they're also needing to compete with companies that do a similar thing and try and maintain their productivity while competing. So News Corp, they're looking at some of these tools for ways to make it so their journalists, the copywriters, the writers, the writing staff, to be able to produce their product as efficiently as possible to kind of maintain that really high productivity. And it's really drawn into clarity. We look at like News Corp in particular, got some figures. They produce something like 3,000 localized articles weekly over the last 2 years, since 2023. But that's 3,000 weekly. So that's a lot of material. That's a lot of content, right? And so if other companies are leading and leaning into using AI to generate similar types of content and stuff, News Corp is going to be under pressure to try and keep up with that. It seems like some of the people who work there aren't particularly psyched about that, and I don't blame them. From a standpoint of some kind of journalistic integrity, we're like, all right, so how much of this is being generated by AI? How much of that is authentic? Can it be trusted? And we're talking about news. We're not just talking about necessarily opinion pieces. Hopefully there's a lot of testing on that to ensure accuracy and that sort of thing. They're using other elements of these tools for just, kind of doing editing work and that sort of thing. But there you go. We've seen Business Insider, News Corp, it's not going to be long before every one of these companies, and actually we're probably already there at this point. I mean, it's hard to say because not every company in that space is really announcing that they're using these tools like this, but we ought to just assume that it's pretty much going to become pervasive, and every news media company operating on the internet from a technology standpoint is going to be using these tools to really drive their productivity and ability to produce their product. And I hate to say it, what they're putting out there is a product, but it is. They're a company. They produce a product that they put out there to generate revenue. And the product is news in a form that is consumable by the average viewer, whether it's on TV, it's on the internet, or even, some of these companies still putting out their paper newspapers, right? Certainly the newspaper itself in the paper format isn't being generated by AI directly, I suppose, maybe with the printing, but the actual content that gets on there, it's probably being put together on a computer beforehand, right? AI is going to be a part of that. So this is really just an interesting thing. This is rather hitting into that employment sector. So, talked about previously some of these different types of jobs and job sectors that are seeming to be particularly vulnerable to AI disruption: journalism, copywriting, media development, digital marketing. All those jobs seem to be potentially heavily impacted by AI because so much of it is language based, and writing and language based, right? And so those are that's one of those areas where these large language models that are really kind of forming the core of like what these AI tools are has really hit first. um, Language, it's in the name, right? So the ability to understand language and craft and generate new content from an examination of other language and content, it's a centerpiece of what these tools do. So that's what News Corp is doing. Going to pay attention to that. I think anybody who's in that kind of space needs to really pay really close attention to that, and just really be curious to get some feedback and comments from folks who are working in news stations around the world. What is it like at your job right now? How's that going? All right, let's hit number 4. AI platforms address college counselors shortage and student guidance. So, talking about the education space, higher education specifically. So certainly, as I've talked about previously, and we're going to continue to look at, the whole higher education space is experiencing a lot of disruption. It was experiencing upheaval and disruption anyway before AI has really came into prominence over the last 2 years, simply because, particularly in the United States, for example, the cost of attending university has vastly outpaced the growth in inflation for most things. So just the cost of going to college has just gotten incredibly expensive. And at the same time, a lot of people are experiencing subpar results as far as getting matched up in careers and getting a job and being able to pay for their student loans and things like that. So you have this interesting and not so good scenario where college is really expensive and it's hard to see it as a great investment. So there you go. There's already a lot of room for disruption and potential change, but now you have AI. People are wondering, how can I get to college anyway, and how can I take advantage of it for what it's still doing, which is providing education. A lot of people have used college counselors as a way to sort of get that leg up in trying to select a college, to figure out how to find scholarships they can use to be able to pay for college, to get help with writing, drafting essays, and the admission applications. There's a lot of work that goes into finding a college, and some people, really benefit from having the resources available that they can hire private college entrance counselors to help, their children and their young people and their family to go ahead and navigate that complex admissions process. Some folks, some people take it, can utilize counselors at their high schools or primary schools to or secondary schools rather, to kind of help them with that. But certainly they're going to be overwhelmed, and there's vastly more students trying to go into college than the people that are filling those college entrance counseling positions. And that's really what this kind of article here from Wired is touching on, is just a really huge gap in availability for counselors like that. Figure here from the Wired article is 1 to 376 counselor to student ratio. I mean, one counselor to more than 300 students to try and help them. I mean, I believe they'll try their best, but that's really daunting figures to try and provide really personalized help, right? So whereas it's getting at, well, there's companies out here like College Guidance Network looks up an example. This isn't a product placement. This is just examples seen brought up in the article and doing some searching here. They're putting out AI enabled tools and programs to kind of fill that gap. Maybe even provide tools for some of the counselors themselves to be able to support more and more prospective college students to be able to navigate that process of finding a school, applying for a school, getting to the school, right? So just the cost factor is just dramatic, right? I mean, some of these platforms, some of these tools, it's like we're talking like $15, $20 a month or something for like a subscription. It's just if you can imagine, it's probably thousands of dollars to have like a private college counselor help your child. Um, if you can afford that, I mean, that's great. More power to you. Many people cannot. So this sort of thing where it's like we're talking about $10, $20 a month, that's just vastly more affordable for so many more people. Now, does that mean all these folks are just going to be guaranteed to get a spot in college? Well, not necessarily, but my hope is that this sort of thing is going to make it a little more equitable or egalitarian in the sense that they're going to have more opportunity, you know, whereas we like to think of things like getting into college as very meritocratic, you know, it's based on your merit and you get in. But let's be real. Like some people end up with more merit through educational opportunities, learning opportunities, and counseling opportunities, right? That is ultimately born from resources made available to get private tutors and things. So while there is real learning and merit developed there, it's kind of enabled by resources that many people don't have. So my hope is this sort of thing can maybe enable more merit-based availability and access to higher education. But that being said, you know, we really have to look at, the higher education space all over the world is going to be disrupted in a pretty tremendous way over the next few years, 10 years. What is college even going to look like 20 years from now? It's really hard to say. I got a lot of thoughts on that. Certainly, schools and colleges are looking at how to utilize AI tools to augment what their teachers can do. But I think a lot of programs are going to change. Some of the degree programs and educational programs at colleges that currently are out there today, there might be many that just straight up disappear. They won't have a customer base for it. If you think about the students are customers, I hate to say that, but it's the truth. Because many types of jobs are just not going to be common in the future because of AI. So anyway, I think this is a good thing. More resources and capabilities for people to navigate the path for higher education. So, all right, let's hit the last story for today. Restaurant chains are deploying AI for personalized menu recommendations and upselling. So this story coming from The Verge. So Applebee's and IHOP are planning an AI-powered personalization engine using customer purchase history for targeted recommendations and upselling. So we've hit on some previous stories, like at fast food restaurants, many of them common in the United States, but also around the world. So McDonald's, Wendy's, Taco Bell, just these companies between them have thousands of locations, and they're all experimenting with AI tools. McDonald's has been looking at with its ordering systems. Wendy's very much in their drive-through systems. Other companies, so we're talking like Chipotle, and some of them have started utilizing AI tools to facilitate their operations, right? So not necessarily customer facing. We've also seen some of the stuff that companies like Starbucks are doing, again, supporting their operations because they might have had mixed results with actual customer facing stuff. Well, this is kind of a different approach here. Dine Brands, which is a company that owns these brands here, they're looking for AI tools to help recommend products and purchases by their customers. It seems like a little bit lower hanging fruit, not quite as complex as just managing direct ordering and trying to capture orders correctly. It's like, hey, using these AI tools to do some classic machine learning, trying to analyze customer behaviors and purchase history, that sort of thing. Just say, hey, looks like you really like this. Welcome to the restaurant. Do you want to get your usual order? That sort of thing. Hey, I mean, if that makes a smoother experience for customers and they're able to enjoy their meal more quickly, maybe and save some money. I don't know. It seems like a good thing, but this comes up in our stories here today because ultimately, like, there's an angle here on employment. Like, what does this do for the people working at the restaurant? Well, this particular element, I mean, this is looking at upselling. So, maybe this will make the restaurant more profitable, being able to retain employment for more people. I mean, that's probably a good thing when you look at it from that standpoint. If they're able to drive more sales, if the restaurant goes out of business, which I see some of these restaurants, Applebee's in my area recently, it's shut down, been around for many years. Nobody wins if the restaurant shuts down because then you lose your job. So in this case, if this makes the company, it makes the restaurant more money, probably a good thing. It sounds like they're also based on the story here, coming from The Verge. They're also looking at exploring the use of AI-powered cameras to detect when a table needs cleaning, testing an AI app for managers. So, really hitting on operational stuff. It doesn't seem to me like we're going to see robots in restaurants, um, clearing the tables, very soon. I mean, certainly countries like Japan have explored the use of automation and robots much more readily in previous years. So there's room for that, and it'll probably happen at some point. But it looks like here, at least, these types of tools can help management at those locations with trying to keep up with the customers, the tables, and so that maybe it'll make their jobs a little bit easier, right? If the management and the waiters and waitresses at the restaurant don't have such a tough time, they can serve their customers better. Customers have a better experience. Everybody wins, right? So this feels like a good thing to me from an employment standpoint. This isn't about getting rid of jobs and replacing people with AI. This is about using AI to help the company make more money, get the kind of foods and products that people want, and help those people doing the jobs that already work there have an easier time to have a great experience for their customers at a restaurant. That's a good thing. I'd like to see it. So there you go. Those are stories for today. Thanks so much for tuning in. If you like this kind of content, if you find these kind of stories helpful to you, I certainly want to stay apprised to what's going on with the job markets, with education. Give the video a like. If you want to get this kind of info on a regular basis, I appreciate a follow, subscribe to the channel. You check it out on YouTube, obviously, but you also find it on x.com, Blue Sky, the website at sapiens4.com, Facebook. Anyway, thanks so much for tuning in, and we'll see you at the next one.